Day. Welcome to Porchlight Letters podcast number 2374. And today's question we are answering is, how do I research people who left no written records? Excuse me. The cough is starting to get better. The frogs are starting to disappear. So let's be gentle with it all. Some lives were never formally recorded, which then makes the challenge of how do we find these people when we can't find written records for them? So marginalized people often lack documentation. There was times when it was not required to record births, deaths, marriages, and that sort of stuff. Parishes or churches would often record things in their own books of records, and sometimes you can find people there. Women and children were definitely underrepresented. In some places, they only recorded births of males. They did not record the female births. I know, crazy as it sounds, that's how it was. Indirect evidence becomes essential. And what indirect evidence is that it's information that doesn't state a fact outright, but it helps you reason towards the truth when no direct records exist. So indirect records evidence comes from patterns, relationships, context, clues found across multiple records. On its own, each piece may seem incomplete, but when combined with other pieces, they point to a conclusion. So there may be no document that says who someone's parents were, but census records show a child living in the same household. Over time, land records place families next to each other. Witnesses on documents repeat across generations. Together, those details suggest a relationship, even though there is no single record that confirms it. Yes. So indirect evidence is especially important when researching people who are poor or marginalized, women or children, migrants or refugees, enslaved or displaced, living in times or places with poor record keeping. You still have to be very careful on the indirect evidence, though, in when you find it, and making sure that it is the right family that you're talking about. Because, sometimes when you get families grouped together, they can have very similar names, and which can cause a headache. Like when I'm researching Eakins, back in the 1800s, the 5 top male names for Eakins that were very popular for Eakins was John, James, George, Thomas, and William. If I had to go through that, it's basically looking for John Smith. On the woman's side, there was Elizabeth, Sarah, Mary. Who else was there? I haven't looked at the Eakins one for a while. Elizabeth, Sarah, Mary. There was 2 others because there were 5 as well. For the life of me, I can't think of them. Elizabeth, Mary, Sarah. Oh, I'll have to go and have a look for those because I don't remember the other 2. I remember the men because I talk about them often. Neighbors and witnesses can reveal connections as well. You might have a statement for something from one of the neighbors, some event that happened where there was a recorded event. You might be looking through newspapers and find mention of a family that was there that could be the one that you're related to. And community patterns will also help fill record gaps as well. So if there was, and communities always keep a lot of records. It's always good to go to the local county archives or city archives and have a look through the records, because there could be meeting minutes, but it's from meetings for associations, for the council, for the board of directors, for the board of blah, 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 for blah, blah, blah. Yes, official genealogy terms. But you could find records of meeting minutes. You could find records from old newspapers. You could find records with land deeds and things like that. But somewhere in there could be a mention of a family, and may even mention the family by name and who the people were in that family. And that could be the only written record that you can find. But it's not direct evidence that those are the people you're looking for. It's indirect evidence, which is pointing towards this conclusion. So when we write our thesis question out, which could be, is John and Mary Williams, and you'll have their birth dates in there, the parents of, and then you'll have the child's name. And now you need to go look for all the records that are out there that could possibly include the child's name, obituaries, death records, marriage records, birth certificates. If you can't find the vital records, you're going to have to look for the indirect ones. What else is out there? There's land deeds, there's census reports, there's somebody may have written in their journal about the people in that area. So there's all these other places that you can go and look that could be mentioned in a newspaper article that may not indirectly connect them, but it could imply that they were connected. It takes a lot of detective work, a lot of deduction, a lot of reading and everything else to try and find this indirect evidence that can help you come to the conclusion, yes or no. Were these the parents of this child? Because there may not be any written record. So, or written vital record, and your vital records are your birth, deaths, and marriages. And so if there's none of those available, or baptism records as well, if there's none of those available, even naturalization reports, naturalization things. The cool part is about with the naturalization, though, especially in America, is they had these very detailed forms that they filled out. It put there and usually it was the male, and it was only the male that could apply for the thing, and there were extenuating circumstances for females, like if they were a widow. But usually it was typically the male, and they would put on their full name, where and when they were born, so their birth date, their date of birth, their place of birth. They would put on, if they were married, the full name of the spouse, including her maiden name, when she was born, where she was born, when and where they got married, and then if they have any children, he has to list all the children, the dates of their birth, their full names, dates of birth, and where they got married. Where they were born. Kids got married. Okay. Yeah. So because back in, I think it was like up until like the 1930s, I think, in America. I'm going to have to go and double check my facts on that one. But I know it was like early 20th century, where if a man applied for citizenship, his wife automatically got it underneath him along with their children. So that was kind of a cool thing. But missing records do not mean missing lives. Just because you can't find formal records, there are plenty of other records out there that can help you fill in some of the gaps. It doesn't mean that they didn't exist. They did exist, just in a different way when we come to looking at the records. So your practical takeaway today is look sideways through records, not just directly. So this is something that I always tell my clients when they're looking for trees. I said, don't just concentrate. Yes, you're going to be mainly working on the main trunk line, which is you, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, your great-da-da-da-da. Look at their siblings as well. Find their siblings, because sometimes in some record for the sibling, you might find that connection that connects the people together as siblings. But not only that, you might find that missing parent that you've been looking for in that way. So sometimes you have to look sideways. You have to look at the siblings, but you also have to look sideways in records. Yes, you have the vital records here, but what other records are available to you? You got census reports, land deeds, association records, newspapers, society, any association, society out there. I've already said that one. Employment records, tax records, electoral rolls. Did I say census reports? They're in there too. There's just so many records out there. Journals come into play as well. Some archives have copies of journals that have been donated to them for preservation, because they just might mention somebody's name in it, or you might hear they might tell the story of they were going through some major event that affected the community, affected the country as a whole, or maybe even the world, like a coronation, a war, an attack on something, a major earthquake, a hurricane coming through. All of these events, so there are people out there who have journaled about them. Maybe if you find those journals, you might find a mention of a distant an ancestor in there, especially if they name people or they were neighbors of that ancestor that you're looking for. Look through all the different records, even graveyard records, walking through the graveyards, going to the office at the cemetery and if you think that people were buried there, ask them about it, because sometimes the headstone does not include everybody that's buried in the grave. We have one grave here in Karori down in Wellington, and a few of my ancestors are buried there. And there's one that when we went, I was with my mum when we went into the office at the cemetery and we were looking for a particular grave and they showed us on the map where it was. And we asked for the grave record. And they brought out the grave record. And what the grave record does is that it lists who purchased the grave and when, and who is buried in there as in body, or whose ashes are interred there. And it lists everybody that's in there, and it's got the dates that the graves were open to place either a coffin in there or a urn. But not everybody could maybe listed on the tombstone. And we were going through one of them, and there was one of my, I've got to remember how this goes. One of my second great grandmothers had purchased this grave, and her niece married somebody that she didn't like. And the name of the nephew-in-law is listed as being buried in the plot. I think it's just his ashes are in there. Yes, so it might have been my great aunt. Might have been as like a second great aunt. Anyway, she's buried in there with her nephew-in-law, who she could not stand when she was alive, and now they're resting together in the same grave. So you find out interesting details like this as well. So, and then there's been times we've asked for grave records. There's been a child buried in there, but there is no mention of them on the tombstone. And it could be that they were stillborn, or they died a few days after birth. So we found those sorts of records too. Grave records are very interesting. So don't forget to check those out too. Like go to the cemetery where you know your ancestors are buried, ask for how to get to a certain plot, and then ask if you can look at the grave records. And there will be a thing on there. One, you've got to say how you're related to that person, and the other thing is that depending when the last person died that was put in there as to whether they will release those records or not. They all have their own little rules and regulations and things. So look sideways, not just directly. And if you want help researching missing ancestors, send us a private message and let's set up a free, no obligation discovery call to get you on your path for helping you find those missing relatives. And our closing thought for today, invisible lives still left traces. So even though their lives were invisible, they still left traces. Somewhere, somehow, they will be found. Family Bibles, that's another one, family Bibles. Anyway, with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening. Tomorrow evening is Sunday for the States, so I will be on between 6 and 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, depending on when we finish with Zanakin Studios podcast, which is at 5 p.m. Pacific, and that's on their YouTube channel, which is at Zanakin Studio, youtube.com/the @ symbol, and then Zanakin Studio. We'll be broadcasting live into that tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Pacific. Then between 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m., depending on when we finish that one, I will be here back on my normal channels, broadcasting live on tomorrow night's question. So go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we'll catch you back here tomorrow evening between 6 and 6:30 p.m. Pacific time.